In a move that should not be a surprise since his company just donated $1 million to Trump's inauguration fund, but which should still be of concern to us, Mark Zuckerberg, the creator of Facebook, the CEO of Meta, which is the company that owns Facebook and Instagram and Threads, released a video earlier this week where he announced that there are some changes coming to those social media platforms.
I want to talk about something important today, because it's time to get back to our roots around free expression on Facebook and Instagram. There's been widespread debate about potential harms from online content. Governments and legacy media have pushed to censor more and more. A lot of this is clearly political, but there's also a lot of legitimately bad stuff out there. Drugs, terrorism, child exploitation,
conspiracy theories, white supremacy, fascism.
These are things that we take very seriously.
Fascism? Is that on the list, Mark?
So we built a lot of complex systems to moderate content. But the problem with complex systems is they make mistakes. Even if they accidentally censor just 1% of posts, that's millions of people. And we've reached a point where it's just too many mistakes and too much censorship. The recent elections also feel like a cultural tipping point towards once again prioritizing speech. So we're going to get back to our roots and focus on reducing mistakes, simplifying our policies, and restoring free expression on our platforms.
Were it not for the election feels like a tipping point, which is setting off alarms in my head, this might not sound so bad. At this point, right? Reducing mistakes? That's always good. We should all be trying to reduce mistakes. Restoring free expression on social media platforms? I'm all for that. I know lots of people who have had posts taken down or have been put in Facebook jail just for posting innocuous things that were misunderstood or were maliciously reported by someone who had an axe to grind against them, or because they were posting leftist activist content that was flagged for some reason, or LGBTQ related content that was flagged for some reason. So if Facebook and the other social media platforms under the Meta umbrella are going to become less punitive toward that kind of stuff, that would be good, right? Is that what you mean by restoring free expression, Mark?
First, we're going to get rid of fact checkers and replace them with community notes similar to X, starting in the US. After Trump first got elected in 2016, the legacy media wrote nonstop about how misinformation was a threat to democracy. We tried in good faith to address those concerns without becoming the arbiters of truth. But the fact checkers have just been too politically biased and have destroyed more trust than they've created, especially in the US.
Hi, Mark. Me again. Couple of questions. The fact checkers are too politically biased, according to who? Who has been complaining about political bias in the fact checking? Also, the fact checkers have destroyed more of whose trust than they have created? Is there a particular group of people, say people who share a certain political viewpoint, who have said that your social media platforms are less trustworthy because of fact-checking? Oh, and one last follow-up question. You've been doing fact-checking up to this point?
Second, we're going to simplify our content policies and get rid of a bunch of restrictions on topics like immigration and gender that are just out of touch with mainstream discourse. What started as a movement to be more inclusive has increasingly been used to shut down opinions and shut out people with different ideas, and it's gone too far. So I want to make sure that people can share their beliefs and experiences on our platforms.
Meta has already begun implementing some of the content policy changes that Mark Zuckerberg is talking about in this video, and if you want an example of the kinds of changes that are being made, here is an article from Wired. Headline, Meta now lets users say gay and trans people have mental illness. This is being reported by Katie Nibbs, who writes, quote, in a notable shift, the company now says it allows, quote, allegations of mental illness or abnormality when based on gender or sexual orientation, given political and religious discourse about transgenderism and homosexuality, and common non-serious usage of words like weird. In other words, Meta now appears to permit users to accuse transgender or gay people of being mentally ill because of their gender expression and sexual orientation. The company did not respond to requests for clarification on the policy. Will making it easier to harass gay and trans people encourage them to share their experiences on Meta's social media platforms, do you think?
Third, we're changing how we enforce our policies to reduce the mistakes that account for the vast majority of censorship on our platforms. The reality is that this is a trade-off. It means we're going to catch less bad stuff, but we'll also reduce the number of innocent people's posts and accounts that we accidentally take down.
Again, if the result is that it's easier to post and share progressive content and content consisting of queer people talking about their experiences, that's great. But in context with the rest of what Zuckerberg is saying here, I wouldn't expect that to be the case. And I love how he says that this will reduce enforcement against innocent people's accounts. Like, he's talking about sending someone to prison for a crime they didn't commit. Being sent to Facebook jail unfairly is annoying for sure, and enforcing the rules in a way that is inequitable toward people in a certain group, like queer people, is fucked up and is something that definitely should be addressed, and doesn't seem like that is remotely being addressed, but whatever. But all of those things are valid issues and valid things to complain about and to be concerned about as far as social media platforms. But like, Facebook jail ain't real jail. You know what I'm saying? Like, let's address the problems and let's take them seriously, but also let's kind of get a grip. This will reduce punishing innocent people. Okay, calm down.
Fourth, we're bringing back civic content. For a while, the community asked to see less politics because it was making people stressed. So we stopped recommending these posts. But it feels like we're in a new era now, and we're starting to get feedback that people want to see this content again. So we're going to start phasing this back into Facebook, Instagram, and Threads, while working to keep the communities friendly and positive.
Oh, now that Trump is about to be the president again and the Republican Party controls both chambers of the United States Congress, political content will be recommended more often. How about that?
Fifth, we're going to move our trust and safety and content moderation teams out of California, and our US-based content review is going to be based in Texas. As we work to promote free expression, I think that it will help us build trust to do this work in places where there is less concern about the bias of our teams.
So yeah, same question as before. Concerns about bias from who exactly? Whose concerns about bias will be eased by moving the content moderation teams from California to Texas? Here's one last clip from Mark.
Finally, we're going to work with President Trump to push back on governments around the world that are going after American companies and pushing to censor more. But now we have the opportunity to restore free expression, and I am excited to take it.
Restoring free expression around the world, as he says there, means pressuring other countries to cut regulations on social media platforms to make it easier for Meta to make money there. That's what that means. That's what he's talking about. In many places internationally, there are tighter legal restrictions which force social media platforms to at least make an effort at responsibly moderating their content, and that costs money and makes it harder to grow their user base, and therefore they don't like that. Trump isn't a supporter of free expression. A lot of this is premised on the idea of, now that we have a new administration coming in and Trump and his people are committed to free expression, we can make some of these changes and correct some of our mistakes. Trump is not a supporter of free expression. There's the flaw in your logic there, Mark, and everybody else who is jumping on this bandwagon. Trump is not a supporter of anything other than himself and his own interests and desires. Not free expression, not democracy, not truth, only himself. How many times does he need to publicly demonstrate this? The jury is no longer out on this. It's not a matter of interpretation. Trump is a grifter and a con artist and a criminal who is out for himself, and he attracts people who are similar. That's the deal. This idea that Donald Trump is going to be this champion of free expression is utterly ridiculous and cuts against every single thing we know about the man and what he stands for, or more to the point, what he doesn't stand for. He is an enemy of free expression and of democracy and of truth, and he has eagerly subverted and attacked all of those things whenever they have threatened him. Here is just a very quick general summary of Trump's supposed commitment to free expression, courtesy of James Surowiecki on Twitter. Trump is suing a pollster who put out a poll he didn't like. He's suing CBS for how it edited an interview with Kamala Harris. He sued Simon & Schuster because Bob Woodward published a book that included verbatim quotes from him. He has zero commitment to free expression. He's not only suing CBS for that 60 Minutes interview with Kamala Harris, he's called for CBS to have its news license revoked. Fortunately, there's no such thing as a news license, and Trump is a blithering fool who knows shit about shit, but the intention is what matters in this context. He's about to be the president again. He regularly threatens journalists and news outlets who report things he doesn't like, which usually consists of just reporting shit he has actually said and done. Nobody makes Donald Trump look worse than Donald Trump. And when reporters tell people about all the shit that Donald Trump himself has said and done that makes him look bad, Donald Trump really doesn't like that. But good thing for us, he's so committed to free expression, right? He has even threatened Mark Zuckerberg. Remember this from this past August? This is from Politico, headline, Trump claims Zuckerberg plotted against him during the 2020 election in soon-to-be-released book. And it's written by Alex Eisenstadt. Save America, a Trump-authored coffee table book being released September 3rd, includes an undated photograph of Trump meeting with Zuckerberg in the White House. Under the photo, Trump writes that Zuckerberg would come to the Oval Office to see me. He told me there was nobody like Trump on Facebook, but at the same time, and for whatever reason, steered it against me. Trump continues, we are watching him closely, and if he does anything illegal this time, he will spend the rest of his life in prison, as will others who cheat in the 2024 presidential election. Trump has made similar remarks about Zuckerberg before. Trump wrote in a July post on Truth Social that if elected, he would pursue election fraudsters at levels never seen before, and they will be sent to prison for long periods of time. We already know who you are. Don't do it. Zuckerbucks, be careful. And again, in those quotes, when Trump refers to election fraud or doing things illegal and cheating in the 2024 election, what he means is anytime anyone talks about things he himself has actually said or done or promised to do that makes him look bad and might make people not want to vote for him. In Donald Trump's mind, that's election fraud, that's election interference, and that has to be smashed. Is Mark Zuckerberg making these changes to Meta's content policies in response to those threats from Trump, those direct personal threats toward him from Trump, now that Trump is about to return to the White House? Trump certainly seems to think so.
Facebook. I think they've come a long way. I watched it. The man was very impressive. I watched it. Actually, I watched it on Fox. I'm not allowed to say that. Say it?
Do you think he's directly responding to the threats that you have made to him in the past? With
Probably. Yeah, probably.
The incoming president of the United States taking a question about whether or not the CEO of a major social media platform has decided to change that platform's content policies in response to being threatened by him, and responding to that question with a shrug and, yeah, probably. That's what we're calling commitment to free expression. This isn't about free expression for Trump, and it's not about free expression for Mark Zuckerberg either. For Mark Zuckerberg, this is about kissing the ring. This is about getting on Trump's good side because Trump is going to be the president. And don't let Zuckerberg or Trump or anyone else gaslight you about this. They like to tell this story now about how anti-Trump Facebook was, how unfairly right-wingers have been treated on Facebook these last few years, when in reality, Facebook has always been one of the largest sources of pro-Trump misinformation and disinformation. A lot of people tell the stories and have these stories in their own lives of older people in their lives, parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, etc. People in their lives who maybe at one point were kind of middle of the road conservative or sort of typical traditional conservative Republican voters. And in recent years, since the rise to political prominence of Donald Trump, they have gone off the deep end. They have been radicalized as right-wing extremists, and they buy into all sorts of utterly ridiculous, non-factual, delusional conspiracy theories and falsehoods and false narratives. And a lot of this is blamed, rightly so, on Fox News. But it also needs to be blamed in a very, very large measure on Facebook, because Facebook has done the exact same kind of thing to a lot of people, has convinced them of all of these fear-mongering false narratives coming out of Trump and his supporters and people in his sphere, and has turned once maybe kind of conservative but relatively reasonable people into utter extremists on the right. Trump complains about Facebook being unfair to him because that's just in his nature. Thin-skinned, shit-for-brains, reactionary narcissist that he is. And he also complains about it because he knows that kind of besieged, victim-playing rhetoric energizes his dipshit supporters. But the truth is, other than maybe Fox News, Donald Trump, to this day, has never had a better friend than Facebook, where his lies and grievances, almost entirely imaginary grievances, by the way, and threats against anybody and everybody who he might consider to be an enemy or consider to be a threat to him, all of that has been allowed to spread on Facebook, mostly unchecked, for years. You can't have free expression in that kind of environment. You can't have free expression, real free expression, in an environment where trolls and bigots and fascists are essentially free to bully and harass and intimidate marginalized people into silence. You can't have free expression in an environment where it's impossible to tell propaganda and misinformation from the truth. And you can't have free expression in an environment where the rules governing what is and isn't allowed are made and enforced according to the whims of the head of state, particularly when that head of state has absolutely no allegiance to freedom or the truth. And you know who used to realize this? Or at least spoke like he realized it? Mark Zuckerberg. Here's some of what Mark Zuckerberg wrote a little over 4 years ago now, in the aftermath of the violent insurrection that Donald Trump incited in an attempt to overthrow the result of the election he lost. Zuckerberg writes, quote, "Over the last several years, we have allowed President Trump to use our platform consistent with our own rules, at times removing content or labeling his posts when they violate our policies. We did this because we believe the public has a right to the broadest possible access to political speech, even controversial speech. But the current context is now fundamentally different, involving use of our platform to incite violent insurrection against a democratically elected government. We believe the risks of allowing the president to continue to use our service during this period are simply too great. Therefore, we are extending the block we have placed on his Facebook and Instagram accounts indefinitely and for at least the next 2 weeks until the peaceful transfer of power is complete. 4 years later, when that same president who threatened democracy is about to return to power, what is Mark Zuckerberg's reaction? To help him. Anyone who claims to be a champion of free speech while doing the bidding of Donald Trump doesn't care about free speech. And anyone who views fact checkers as a liability is not to be trusted.